Playing for Mom, Anthony Edwards' emotional Game 4 masterpiece. Welcome to The Explainer, everyone. You know, sometimes a box score it only tells a tiny fraction of the actual story. Today, we're looking at a hyper-physical, fiercely contested playoff battle, but one that was fueled by something way, way deeper than just wanting to advance in the postseason. We're going to look at raw emotion, unbreakable will, and a literal masterpiece painted under the absolute brightest lights.
Okay, let's dive into this. I just wanted to win for my mom. It was that simple. The date of Game 4 was May 10th, Mother's Day. And when Anthony Edwards sat down at that post-game press conference, right after temporarily rescuing a Minnesota Timberwolves season that was, honestly, teetering on the brink of disaster, he redirected the very first question he was asked. He didn't talk about the game plan. He didn't complain about the whistle. He spoke quietly and directly from the heart.
To truly grasp the weight of this performance, we really have to look at this timeline. Back in 2015, Edwards experienced just unimaginable heartbreak. He lost his mother, Yvette, to cancer. And then, incredibly, just 8 months later, cancer also took his grandmother, Shirley. It's the kind of profound loss that fundamentally changes a person forever. But look at what happens next. Fast forward to 2020. On the night he was drafted #1 overall, he made absolutely sure they were right there with him, placing 2 hyper-realistic portraits of them by his side on the sofa. And that brings us to May 10th, 2026, a Mother's Day playoff matchup where he delivered a stunning 36-point tribute, telling reporters afterward, "I couldn't lose this game for her."
In this number right here, 5. It is not just a jersey number. Both his mother and his grandmother passed away on the 5th day of the month. So every single time he steps onto that hardwood, every time he pulls that jersey over his shoulders, he is carrying their memory with him. It's almost like a steady, thumping heartbeat behind his entire career. He literally wears his heart and his history right there on his chest. And on this specific Sunday, that foundational motivation was put to the ultimate test.
Because suddenly, out of nowhere, the entire complexion of the game violently shifts. Early in the second quarter, it's a physical battle for a rebound in heavy traffic, and bam! Victor Wembanyama swings a right elbow that catches Timberwolves center Naz Reid flush on the chin. I mean, it is a vicious hit, and Reid goes down hard to the floor. The officials rush to the monitor, and the tension in the arena absolutely spikes. Lead referee Zach Zarba steps back out and makes the call. Flagrant foul 2. Wembanyama is ejected. Just like that, in a flash, the 8-foot defensive anchor of the San Antonio Spurs, the player who had completely controlled this series, is out of the game.
Now, you would think the Spurs would just collapse, right? Wrong. The younger Spurs absolutely refuse to fade. In fact, they step on the gas. Rookie Dylan Harper explodes for 24 points off the bench. Second-year guard Stephon Castle pours in 20 crucial points of his own. And then you have the veteran presence of De'Aaron Fox draining these highly contested, clutch second-half jumpers. The Spurs actually rally without their star, surging ahead and building an 8-point lead early in the fourth quarter against a Minnesota team that suddenly found themselves totally stuck in the mud.
Now, what's really interesting about this slide is the psychological battle happening on the floor. Minnesota's head coach, Chris Finch, noted that human nature kind of crept in. He felt his team let their minds slip and lost their offensive way, essentially relaxing because Wembanyama was gone. But Anthony Edwards, he read the room perfectly. He recognized the absolute danger of a team playing with absolutely nothing to lose. He knew that without Wembanyama, the Spurs were playing faster, looser, and with this really dangerous, free-flowing confidence. So how do you counter that? You attack. 38, look at that number. That represents the total number of shots the Timberwolves took off drives in Game 4. That is their second most in any game ever under coach Chris Finch. And incredibly, 30 of those 38 drives came after Wembanyama was ejected. They saw the opening and they put their foot firmly on the pedal.
So the real question becomes, with the ultimate rim protector removed from the equation, how exactly did Minnesota execute this relentless attack? The dynamics of the game had completely flipped, basically turning the paint into an absolute battlefield.
And this brilliantly illustrates the resulting onslaught. The Spurs were forced to put the far less fearsome Luke Kornet on the floor, or sometimes go with no center at all. The Timberwolves smelled blood. Rudy Gobert charges in for back-to-back and-ones in the closing minutes, getting the crowd roaring with every single flex. Ayo Dosunmu slices through the empty paint for a massive momentum-shifting layup. And Naz Reid, the guy who took that elbow to the chin earlier, gets his revenge with a vicious putback that essentially seals the Spurs' fate.
So the crucial point is who led this charge when it mattered most. Looking at Edwards' 36 points, in the fourth quarter when Minnesota was down by 8 and staring at a devastating 3-1 series deficit, Edwards simply took over. He played all 12 minutes of the final frame. He scored 16 of his 36 points right there in the fourth. The absolute climax? With 2 minutes and 24 seconds left, he grabs a long offensive rebound, drives fiercely back into the paint, and floats a beautiful finger roll right over Luke Kornet. Pure dominance. But let's take a step back and really appreciate the grit here. This wasn't a fully healthy superstar just gliding to victory. Just 15 days prior, Edwards suffered a badly hyperextended left knee and a bone bruise. Yet here he is, playing in his fourth consecutive game in this intensely physical series, eclipsing 40 minutes of court time for the second straight night. To pull off a 114-109 victory under those physical conditions, that requires an immeasurable level of sheer will and pain tolerance. He promised himself he couldn't lose this game for his mom, and his battered body simply had to comply.
And now the dust settles, but the war is far from over. The series is tied at 2 games apiece. We're shifting back to San Antonio for Game 5. The Spurs are furious, the Timberwolves are emboldened, and the physical toll on both sides is staggering. In a series this volatile, where absolute superstars are leaving everything on the floor, who is going to break first under the absolute pressure? You definitely won't want to miss what happens next.